It's time for Temple Talk at home. Today's is called The Temple Imagery in Eden is Not Subtle by Skye Jethani. I've been trying to show you that the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2-3 has all of the qualities of a temple, and that God's ancient people would have immediately recognized this and interpreted the story through this lens. First, the garden is where Yahweh walks, a common way of identifying his presence in the temple throughout the Old Testament. Second, the garden is located on a mountain, a high place where the heavens and the earth overlap, and 4 rivers flow out from Eden. Alongside the description of these rivers, Genesis 2 includes more details about the garden that invoke temple imagery. We are told that the Lord caused every good and beautiful tree to grow in the garden, and in the center was the tree of life. This fits how most of us think of Eden. It's a lush, verdant paradise. Given the arid topography of the Middle East, you can understand why ancient Israelites would imagine the overlap of the heavens and the earth as a flourishing garden with abundant trees and food. But what many modern Bible readers may not realize is that this description of the garden perfectly matches the decor of ancient temples. The temple's interior in Jerusalem was ornately carved with palm trees, flowers, and fruit. For example, each pillar at the entrance was decorated with rows of 200 bronze pomegranates, and the capitals of the pillars were in the shape of lilies. Inside the temple was an ornate golden lampstand called a menorah. It's described as having branches with flower-like cups and buds and blossoms on each branch. In other words, the menorah is a tree. Set within the garden-themed temple, some scholars believe the menorah is meant to be a stylized tree of life. Finally, Genesis 2 includes the seemingly random and irrelevant detail that gold and precious stones, some translations say onyx, are located near Eden. A modern reader will likely respond to this with a shrug of the shoulders and think, whatever. I certainly have. But an ancient person reading or hearing this text would recognize the significance of this detail. Imagine if somehow an ancient Israelite was presented with a text from our time and culture that included the phrase stars and stripes, or maple leaf. They would likely shrug their shoulders and think, whatever. But you and I would immediately recognize the detail as a reference to either the American flag or the Canadian flag. Similarly, the detail about gold and precious stones in Genesis 2:12 would immediately conjure up images of a temple. The temple in Jerusalem was ornately decorated with gold and precious stones, as were the garments of the priests in the temple and the sacred objects used in temple ceremonies. Here's my point. The temple imagery in Genesis 2 and 3 is not subtle or hidden. It's not some deep subtext only recognized by Bible geeks and theologians. The original audience of Genesis would have seen the Garden of Eden story shouting temple, and that has huge implications for how we understand the role of the man and woman God puts there, the nature of their rebellion against God, and the meaning of their expulsion from the garden. In other words, if we fail to see Eden as a temple, then we are likely to misinterpret everything that happens there.